February day, I wanted to go over a topic that's been coming up. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to go over a topic that's been coming up a lot more recently. I've gotten, in the last couple of weeks, several questions about whether or not they should get vaccinated and what kind of medicines and care and precautions they should take before coming to Japan. And as a resident here that's been living here for 20 years, I kind of scratched my head because, you know, people who live in the cities, people who live here in Tokyo, they don't have the same kind of questions. They don't ask these types of things. And so, believe it or not, most of the local people here have no idea if you need something like a Japanese encephalitis shot. So, I've done some digging, and I'm drawing on my own experiences having been a backpacker through Southeast Asia and East Asia, visiting almost all of the countries and living in Japan for, this is now my 20th year. I could give you some information, but I want to have a disclaimer because I've written down all this information because it's very important not to get this wrong. I'm not a doctor. Doctors are in there in that clinic behind me. This is my opinion as someone who has asked multiple times. I've traveled to all these countries, yada, yada, yada. So it's sort of a disclaimer. Do your research. Now, what is Japanese encephalitis? A lot of people who are seeing this or hearing this word might be for the first time. It's abbreviated JE for Japanese encephalitis. It has the name Japan in it, but that doesn't mean this is where it's really bad. In fact, Japanese encephalitis in Japan is extremely rare. There's not a lot of cases where anymore because of the vaccine. Okay, so what is it? Japanese encephalitis is an infection of the brain caused by the Japanese encephalitis virus. While most infections result in little or no symptoms, occasional inflammation of the brain occurs. In these cases, symptoms may include headache, vomiting, fever, confusion, and seizures. This occurs 5 to 15 days after infection. So yeah, this is a pretty serious disease that you can get, and it's prevalent mostly in this area of Asia. I'm gonna show you a map. I'm gonna duck in here out of the snow. Tokyo doesn't get that much snow, to believe it or not. This is it's rare. Maybe the last snow day that we have this year. Now, Japanese encephalitis is transmitted by mosquitoes, and the quote-unquote reservoirs of these mosquitoes are pigs and wild birds. So, this limits Japanese encephalitis to just basically rural areas. You don't get Japanese encephalitis in urban areas, which means if you're taking a vacation, you're going to Kyoto, Osaka, Nagoya, Tokyo, Sendai, maybe like urban areas on the east coast of Japan, you're probably not going to need the Japanese encephalitis vaccine. I would probably be against you doing that because I'm not pro shots. In fact, unless I definitely need it, I don't like to take medicine. I'm like a lot of you. I try to stay away from hospitals and doctors. I'm not a big fan of hospitals. Who is? Except for maybe doctors and nurses and people who work in the industry. But my point is, I don't like to get anything that's unnecessary. Now, the Japanese encephalitis shot is being sold by a lot of pharmaceutical companies and doctors in the United States. I'm not against that. I'm actually for it because if you read what is possible, you know, brain swelling, and I want to tell you this. This is very important. Japanese encephalitis is not curable. So once you get it, you have it for life. There's 70,000 cases of Japanese encephalitis reported annually. That's a lot. However, there's a caveat here. I printed out this map. I'm going to put a link in the description to it. This map shows you where Japanese encephalitis is, and you can see right there, Japan is in the yellow. So there are very few cases of Japanese encephalitis in Japan. Believe it or not, there are as many cases in Japan as there would be like Australia or the United States. I think it's 1 in every 100,000 100,000 people since the year 2002, and it's dropping. Why is the rate of Japanese encephalitis dropping in Japan? Vaccine. Because everyone has the vaccine or has been vaccinated, you don't get Japanese encephalitis in Japan. So it's sort of a tricky question. Should you get the vaccine? Yeah, you know what? A lot of people here have the vaccine, which is why they don't get Japanese encephalitis. So I have to say that it's probably a good idea. But as I started off, you don't want to get it if you're just coming to Japan for a short trip and you're sticking to to urban areas like cities. If you're in this situation, yeah, you don't need a Japanese encephalitis. Who needs it? If you're going to be staying in Japan for a while in the season, which is, I would say, the end of May through the beginning of October. And this is the season that the mosquitoes are biting a lot, give or take a few weeks. That's safe. If you're coming to Japan in the summer, the late spring and the early fall, and you're in rural areas like working on a farm, you're hiking, you're in places where you're going to get bit by mosquitoes, you might really want to consider getting the Japanese encephalitis shot. And this is coming from a guy who hates needles and things that I don't need inside my body. This vaccine has some side effects, but not anything that's really bad that will kill you or stick with you for the rest of your life. I'm gonna put a link in the description that will give you some more data from the Japan side. I know a lot of people go to the CDC website to get information, and that's really good, but that's based, thank you Jason for the super chats. So a lot of people watching this might not be watching it just for the information, they're just watching it for a walk around Tokyo or I really appreciate the support for the channel. I'm gonna give you information from the Japan side. This is the side, if you're researching Japanese encephalitis or whether or not you should get this shot, you're gonna wanna get both sides, I think. And the Japan side says, basically, I'll sum it up for you, but I want you to take a look at the links in the description. I think this is really important. And I'm gonna give you, before I end this live stream, some situations of how Japan treats diseases and some other stuff that might be here. So this is from NIID.go.jp. This is the CDC of Japan. NIID. This is an annual surveillance data report. The amount of cases of Japanese encephalitis since 1960. There used to be over 1,000 cases of Japanese encephalitis reported in Japan until 1960, and that's when everyone started getting vaccinated. So getting vaccinated is pretty important. Now, since 2004, there's been no reported cases of Japanese encephalitis. You can see it on the reporting data. It says ... That doesn't mean that it didn't happen, it's just it wasn't reported. Acute encephalitis from 2004 to 2013, trace, 0. Less than 0.01%. So maybe one person got it in the entire country. Again, because people are vaccinated here in Japan. So take a look at the data in the description. Japan has other stuff. There is sometimes outbreaks of typhoid. Sometimes there's outbreaks of hepatitis, but these are very, very small, rare. And it's like in the United States too, because you have the same problems all over the world, even in the developed world. Yeah, TB, lots of other diseases that are borne by mosquitoes. The most recent one that comes to mind as a resident of Tokyo was in 2014. There was an outbreak of dengue fever. And Japan had not had an outbreak of dengue fever since 1945, I believe. So that's like going way back to World War II, when the conditions were really bad and dengue fever just proliferated because of the conditions after the war, during the war. Just there's nothing around. Even in the city of Tokyo, they had dengue fever back in 1945. And after the war, it was just eradicated. There was no dengue fever until something happened in 2014. It originated in Yoyogi Park in the center of the city. And the dengue fever was reported, and I think there was like 50 or so cases. This is an estimate reported of dengue fever, which is like, what? In Japan? So the residents here were really taken aback by that. The response by the government in Tokyo was rapid, and they quickly shut down and quarantined Yoyogi Park. So you can still see images on Google. If you Google the Yoyogi Park 2014 dengue fever outbreak, they sprayed the park down. You couldn't get near the park, in fact. And when the weather got cooler, the reports of the dengue fever went down to 0, and the next year, nothing. Because the spraying, because of the precautions, because of the quarantine, it all worked. So Japan is a very rapid response. Japan is also one of the countries in Asia where everywhere in this country you have clean drinking water from the tap. You can just whoosh and drink from all the way in Okinawa to the top of Hokkaido. All over the country, you have clean drinking water. It's amazing for Asia because, you know, my family lives in India and we still have to boil the water or buy bottled water. Even in the cities, although it's getting a lot better. Japan has so rapidly improved the infrastructure after World War II that by this time in 2018, the entire country has clean drinking water. And that's a testament of how safe and how hygienic this country is. And I'm a resident, I'm gonna be a little bit biased, but it's just a pretty amazing place. It's really clean. So you don't get a lot of infectious diseases. When there are, people will wear masks. Like right now during the influenza season, and they wear masks for 2 reasons. I made a video on this on the main channel you might want to check out. Why they wear the masks is that it number one, if you are sick, it prevents other people from getting sick. Maybe it cuts down on it. It won't be 100% effective, but it cuts down on it. Number 2, people who aren't sick wear masks, adding another layer of protection. So, yeah, they might. It's not 100% effective, but it cuts down significantly. If you're on the subway, and right now this is the hay fever season, people are sneezing. So anyone who is sick, when they sneeze, all those particles go all over the place. But if they have a mask on, and you have a mask on, that's gonna cut down on the transmission. So even though Tokyo is one of the most crowded cities in the world, thank you so much for super chats. I see them coming up right now. I appreciate it. Even though this is one of the most crowded cities and the commuting time between 7 and 9 a.m. is insane, okay? People don't always get sick. It doesn't spread like wildfire because people take precautions. That's the kind of country that Japan is, and that's why you might want to consider not getting the shot if you're sticking to urban areas and you're coming here during the seasons where there's no chance of getting it. Like right now, you don't need a Japanese encephalitis shot. There's no mosquitoes because it's winter. Now, as a traveler of the world, I've been to 70 countries, traveling, backpacking since 1998. A lot of countries here in Asia. And my experience is that the vaccines are important. You should get it. But the most important thing, more than the vaccines, is to cover yourself, all right? I got dengue fever in Cambodia twice. The first time was pretty bad. I felt sick for like 3 weeks and just like no energy for a month after that. The second time was awful. I had to check myself into a hospital in Singapore. I got it in Cambodia, and this is because I was stupid. This is where I'm going with this. I had to check myself into a hospital in Cambodia. The hospital, half of it was outside in what looked like a desert. I mean, it was sand. They didn't even have an asphalt. This was the kind of hospital I was in Cambodia, outside of Angkor Wat in the year 2000. Yeah, the year 2000, I think. It was like many years ago. 2000 or 2002, sometime back then. I went to Bangkok. I went to the hospital there. They blotched the blood work. So I flew down to Singapore and checked myself in a hospital, and they said that I had dengue hemorrhaging fever, which meant that 10% of the people die from it. So I was lucky to get to a hospital in Singapore, be diagnosed, and then I flew back to Japan where I got proper care at a hospital. They took really good care of me, and I was back on my feet within 4 months. I was knocked out for 4 months because of the dengue fever. And this could have been prevented because I was walking around Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is a beautiful place, but in 2019, when I first went there in 1999, and I went back there again in 2002, I believe, I went around there in a tank top and shorts and sandals, like a hippie, all right? Because it's so hot. And I walked around, I was totally exposed to the elements, all right? The result was that mosquitoes were getting me like crazy. From dawn to dusk, from during the daytime, I was getting bit left and right. And I've been bit by mosquitoes, so I didn't think too much of it until this symptom started to hit. Whoa, I see that crow up there. Whoa, you gotta watch out for the crows too. You see it? Sorry, buddy. Tricks are for kids. So you want to take precautions, like staying away from crows, and also addressing. Don't wear, if you're in an area, like when there's an epidemic of Japanese encephalitis, you're gonna know about it, and you don't want to wear short sleeves, a tank top, and shorts and sandals, just because you want to stay cool. You have to also think that these mosquitoes are going to see you as a meal, and they're going to bite the heck out of you. And the best thing that you can do is to take precautions yourself and wear proper clothing. Oh, it's nice and warm inside this building. All right, so taking proper precautions, meaning wear some light long sleeve shirts, wear socks, wear shoes. These mosquitoes for Japanese encephalitis, they bite during the cooler hours of the day, which means they bite between dawn and dusk and dawn. So it's in the evening. When you're sleeping, even if you're in Japan, try to find places with mosquito nets, or make sure you sleep where places that you're protected, or cover your hands with lotion or cream that has DEET in it. And that's going to help a lot too. But all in all, I think the best thing that I can recommend is to get the Japanese encephalitis shot only if you know you're going to be here during the season, and only if you're going to be in rural areas like farms or forests deep for an extended amount of time around animals. And you won't get it, and you won't be that one person in 100,000 to get Japanese encephalitis. I got this question from Amanda, who's going to be traveling to Japan, and I got this question again from a viewer yesterday, and a viewer a few days ago. So it's something that's on people's minds, so I hope I could address that to you. If you have any questions right now, I will spend the next couple of minutes answering them. Crows are not allowed to send super chats, sorry. Japan has a lot of crows. They're pretty territorial, and I've seen little kids get attacked by the crows. So respect the crows. Don't disrespect those crows, unless they're named Toby. That's an inside joke. There are other infectious diseases, but they're not anything different than what would be in your own country, all right? In general, Japan has a very low rate of diseases, just because people take precautions usually. And I'm talking about STDs because I just got this chat on it. People take precautions. People are usually quite responsible. People have a responsibility not just for themselves but for their community, so people take care of themselves. And in general, when it comes to anything that has to do with personal responsibility, Japan does an awesome job of making sure of it. If you remember, during the World Cup and the Brazil Olympics in Rio, the Rio Olympics, Japanese fans were cleaning the stadium after it because they felt a responsibility to take care of the things that were right in front of them. This is a Japanese trait. I know there are people that won't do this, but in general, as my experience here in Japan, the community will see a problem in front of them and take care of it. This might not go with politicians because they're politicians, but people, everyday people like us, we have a personal responsibility to take care of the things that we see in front of us. If there's a piece of trash, pick it up, throw it away. If you see something that's going wrong, maybe let that person, give that person some help, or ask them if they need help. And in Japan, I'm going back inside. In Japan, we have these kinds of situations where people, this is just the way that the people are here. Is there any other questions about infectious diseases and not the 7-Eleven behind me? When are you going to do the next live stream? I might do another one later today. I'll schedule it if I can. Earthquakes. This is something I'm going to do in a separate live stream, but I think it's very important for you to be aware that Japan has earthquakes. I think if you probably know this, but Japan has earthquakes. We haven't had a big one recently, but they occur at just random times, usually when I'm sleeping. And anything over magnitude 5.0 gives you a jolt. But after the earthquake in 2011, March 11, 2011, the Great Tohoku earthquake, I'm pretty used to these earthquakes now. I don't get jostled, I don't get shocked by any earthquake unless it's a big one. And it has to be like magnitude 7 before I start freaking out and my eyes go big like this. And then I start going like this left and right, and then I just book and go head for cover. And I've seen foreign tourists that are in the middle of an earthquake. You can tell who they are. They're the ones who go underneath the tables, even though it's just a little tremor, because they're not used to an earthquake at all. I was like that too the first week I got to Japan. We had an earthquake, and I remember just freaking out and going under the table and then watching the people around me just kind of giggle. And I said, look, it's better to be safe than sorry. And that goes with the Japanese encephalitis shot. If you're not sure, and listen to your doctor, but also the doctors, I know they want to sell these vaccines because they can be incredibly expensive in the United States. I don't know why, but they're like 3 to 5 times the cost in the United States than in other places around the world for the Japanese encephalitis shot, and that makes people not want to get it because it's so darn expensive, and it doesn't need to be. This shot's been around since the late 1950s, I believe. So if you're worried about the cost, think about the cost of not getting it and getting a brain swelling and a disease that is not curable. But on that same token, flip it over. If you're not coming in the seasons that in Japanese encephalitis is present, and you're not going to rural areas, and you're willing to cover up and cover up properly, I think it's fine not getting the Japanese encephalitis, because most people in Tokyo do not have the Japanese encephalitis shot. All right, you get it only in certain rural regions, and that's one of the reasons why the transmission rate is pretty low. Despite the name Japanese encephalitis, in the map links that I'm going to put in the description, check it out. You'll see Japan has a very, very low transmission rate. China, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Nepal, North Nepal, these are all areas, South Nepal, these are areas where the transmission rate for Japanese encephalitis is highest. Even though the name has Japan in it, Japan is not the hotbed of Japanese encephalitis. But it doesn't help. You know, if there was like the American syphilis, I think people would say, when I go to America, I'm probably going to need to double up my protection, right? So I think in that sense, you know, having Japanese in the name for encephalitis does not help Japan with that disease. But in general, according to the data on the Japan side and the CDC, by the way, this is not a hotbed. Monitor, before you come, monitor the outbreaks, check out the CDC site, see if there is a problem, see if there is an area to avoid, and then if you take these precautions and cover up, you should be fine. Again, after I've done it for 20 years, I'm getting bitten like I was like a cookie in a kindergarten. I've gotten bit and eaten by these bugs, man, and I do not get any diseases. It's fine. It's just like in the US or northern Sweden, where the mosquitoes I've heard are really bad. I hope this was useful. If you have a question, food poisoning, just really quickly, do not go to ramen shops where there's no lines and the ramen shop looks dirty, because there's thousands and thousands of ramen shops. Not every ramen shop in Japan is successful. If there's not a line, it's probably not an amazing place. Doesn't mean you shouldn't go to help out local owners, it also means that maybe they're taking shortcuts and the ramen is bad. Because I've gotten sick many times, mostly from just ramen that is not cooked properly, or it's a new chef or something, but you just don't know about it unless you're a local, where the good places are. If there's a line, you know it's going to be pretty good. If they can afford a vending machine ticket system, it's usually pretty good because they have the money to buy that. If it's an old place that has less customers, they're probably taking shortcuts like they did in the 1950s, because this chef might have been making ramen since the 1950s and not, you know, changed to the new hygiene laws of the 21st century. So you have to take that in consideration. I've gotten sick a few times in Japan, food poisoning, I think 3 times in 20 years. It does happen. But if you're smart about that too, and go to places that you know are going to be good, and ask around for good restaurants and places that you don't know. I got sick most recently while I was hitchhiking last year. I ate at a ramen stand in a truck because the person who picked me up while I was hitchhiking took me to eat here because he said she makes the best ramen. The lady was smoking a cigarette while she was preparing the ramen, and I could see some of the ashes going into the bowl of ramen. So I wasn't really hot about eating it, but I didn't want to insult the guy who picked me up because he told me this is the best ramen in the world. Obviously, that man does not get out of his area very often because he has not had the best ramen in the world. That, unfortunately, is not where in that truck that lady was preparing. It's pretty nasty. Another infectious disease was the bug that from the symbol bug for the apple. So if anyone is trying to copy paste that bug right now, I patched it yesterday or 2 days ago when the patch was released. So we're fine. Apple got it. It's update 11.2.6. Update your phone if you have it, because if you don't and you have an iPhone, that symbol will crash your phone until you patch it. So there you go. Leave a comment in this video below, and I'll try to answer it. And I think this is an important question, and if this is part of your research, I think you're doing your research, and that's really good. Check out the links. All right, great. The Tokyo Olympics is coming. We're ramping up. Things are getting really excited around here. So yeah, come to Japan as soon as possible before it gets too crowded. It's getting crowded. There's a lot of people coming. I'm gonna turn the camera off for 20 seconds. Subscribe